It's not often you as a coach have that opportunity to possibly leave. And it was something that certainly I hadn't really thought about over the years. We coach, and at some point they tell you to leave. And as difficult as being fired is, it sure seems easier to thank everyone and move on your merry way. But this, I'll try to hit everything, and I'm going to ask or answer every question until you guys are done answering. So I'm sorry if this takes a while, but yeah, we're not in any hurry. I thought about this. I can't think of one time the answer was no. Now, it might be like, oh, we're trying to do something and we don't have enough time to remodel. And so it might have been time driven, but the answer was never no. And look, that's easy when Mickey has the credit card and I've got the wish list. I'd like to thank Dennis Lauscha, our president and a good friend, for people talk about culture and like what's the secret. Teams right now, 8 teams, 9 teams, they're all searching for the right culture. Everyone wants to know how, and it's very difficult. And yet, if I was writing a book, I'd say it's also very simple. The alignment of ownership, your club president, your general manager, your head coach, right through your roster, that sounds easy. But like any relationship, they require work, right? I mean, it requires time and energy. It requires a similar goal. It requires us all to kind of like lay down our arms and our egos for the best of the team. And if we ask that of our players, then certainly we have to ask that of our organization. We had a lot of trips. We had fun trips, crazy trips where the very first year before we drafted Reggie Bush, we were out selling tickets and listening to 80s music and trying to figure out who knew the words. And then when we drafted Reggie Bush, we sold out. And I'm like, thank God we don't have to go on those those freaking ticket bandwagon drives. We've been sold out ever since. Mickey Loomis, a dear friend. I would say more importantly, a friend, just as importantly, my general manager, and just as importantly, the person that gave me this opportunity. He took a chance on a first-time head coach, and you guys know kind of the batting average and the challenges for these positions. They're hard. Every year we're reminded of that. And I've written about this. I've spoken about it. And look, I had just interviewed in Green Bay with the late Ted Thompson. I thought I had a great interview. And when I landed here, it was right after Katrina in January. And many of you remember that. And I just thought, when I met Mickey, I thought, man, I like this guy. He's got a heck of a task ahead of him. And I kept looking at my flip phone at the time, waiting for that Green Bay area code to come in. And I got the message that evening that they had gone in a different direction, and I remember just throwing the phone into the pillow and thinking, holy cow. And it was the best thing that happened. And sometimes, again, you don't have any control over that. And so he trusted his gut. And beyond just hiring me, I can't think, we've had disagreements multiple times, and yet we've always been in concert. And so, like, one of my biggest, not concerns, but one of my biggest second thoughts was, man, I don't want to not be around this really, really good friend of mine. And so, that's not going to happen. I mean, I'm actually moving into another property here locally, but more than my general manager, more than the person that hired me, more than all of those things is, I would say, one of my best friends. And I appreciate that. I mean, I could give you 1,000 stories that would be interesting because our personalities are so different. Like, he walks slow, it bothers me. I want him to pick it up. When you make a decision like this, you spend time with your loved ones, you spend time with your family. I've got, a daughter who's out west in media trying to become what many of you are, and a son who's in college. A wife, Skylene, who we've been together for many years, 10 years, and got married last June. And I've confided in those guys quite a bit and talked about these decisions quite a bit. And I appreciate them. And they've been extremely just good listeners, because ultimately, like, we all want happiness for our friends. We want happiness and health for our friends and family. Those are the two things I think about maybe as I've grown older. If your children are happy and healthy, then you're blessed, I think. And so I feel like there's been a very steady listening group here, and without any angle relative to, hey, what is it that you're looking for? Because honestly, as I sit here today, and this is okay, I don't know what's next. And look, I read the reports and I understand. I've not spoken to anyone from a media outlet relative to doing television or radio. Maybe that opportunity arises, but every time I read something that says, like, he's in line for this job, I'll call my agent, Don, and I'll say, Don, did you hear something? Because I have not heard anything. And that's okay. I think I'd like to do that. I think I'd be pretty good at it. But so stepping outside, like in the cold weather today, and being a little uncomfortable professionally or from a career standpoint is okay. I don't like the word retirement. Mr. B didn't like it either. He always said, retirement's overrated. We get sold this whole image of retirement by these investment groups on TV and golf courses and retirement. And so, I still have a vision for doing things in football. And I'll be honest with you, that might be coaching again at some point. I don't think it's this year. I think maybe in the future, but that's not where my heart is right now. It's not at all. When you come in as a young coach, you make a lot of mistakes, because you're trying to do everything you think you need to do, and it's not until you get older and more experienced that you realize the more important things are this and not that. And hopefully, in my latter years, you guys have found me very accessible, very friendly. But I don't think any of us, when we started, certainly I didn't when I started, understood the dynamics and what took place post-Katrina with that 06 season that I thought, and I would argue, was every bit as important as any other season that we've had here, relative to where the city was. And it became much bigger than football. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but this fan base has been amazing. And you do this and you travel to cities and you see other venues. This is by far one of the most difficult places to play, and unfortunately we didn't win enough home games this year, but man, the fans are something else. It's not a wine and cheese crowd. People make decisions to buy season tickets here that goes into their budget relative to what other things they're choosing to do. We appreciate all of that. I have a really good memory and can remember back in 06 when we drafted Reggie Bush and we drafted the rest of that class, and the excitement level. I don't have a history. I've met, now Tulane Stadium, Jeff, I'm guessing holds 70-some thousand people. I don't know. All right, but I've met 110,000 people. They told me that they were there for that game and the kick return over the years. And the passion that has been handed down generationally is unbelievable. Because when you're a young kid, you root for who your dad or mom root for. You don't know. And so the amount of stories post '09 season, where a grandparent wasn't alive to see a Super Bowl, but they were, all of that just makes what we do, like, man, fulfilling, pretty special. We're teachers, but that's unique. And I don't know that any player back then when we signed on, or any coach, myself included, knew quite actually what we were getting into. And that's the truth. So thank you, City of New Orleans, our fans. I'll be honest, when I hear the Bengals, and I'm rooting kind of for Cincinnati a little bit in the postseason, but the Who Dey thing that came after, I don't know what's next, and it kind of feels good. The last thing I did before I went to bed, I Google searched how not to cry during a speech, and one of the items was drink water and yawn. Well, I didn't want to yawn, but it worked a little bit. So with that, I'll open the floor to questions. When Drew retired, look, he and I never discussed when his last game would be or when I'd be finished. I just felt like this season it was challenging for everyone. But man, I felt like it was time. I felt like it was time. I kind of knew maybe heading into training camp this might, but you don't share that with anyone. You think, well, let's see how the season goes, and we're working hard, and I felt the time was right for me. I felt the time was right, and it's something that I've been thinking about. I think that, look, you have close friends in the industry. I've lost a few close friends in this industry in the last 2 or 3 years. And also, forget football. There's other things, spending more time. There's a lot of sacrifices you make. And so not many get to choose their terms. And I looked at it as an opportunity also to see my kids more, to travel some more, to get in better shape. There's an attrition 2 a.m, and I know I hear people say, well, you don't have, yeah, I get it, but I need to. That's the way it works for me. And I think the attention to details are so important that it can be exhausting. And so I felt, as this season was winding down, that it was the right thing. And then the last week and a half, yeah, I'm comfortable with that. And now, so we had won 4 divisions in a row and competed our tail off. Tampa Bay this year won the division, and congratulations. And yet, man, we battled against them. Atlanta and Carolina, they're working to get things going. And so I like the roster. Yeah, there's some challenges, but man, we played good defense this year. Man, our kicking game, Riz and Phil, were outstanding. Consistently in the top 5. And you see a lot of exciting football, but you also see a lot of bad football, and it's hard for the fan to see it. And there's a young group of offensive players. But it wasn't about that. It wasn't about that. It was a personal decision of feeling like, it's time. But not with any regret. There's some excitement, like, all right, what next? And I honestly don't know what's next. The question is, how do I want to be remembered? And someone who had passion, and someone that cared a lot, winning Winning's important in that. It's important in that. I thought about my mom, if she were alive today. Two things. I wore this shirt because she always said you have to wear this color. It matches your eyes. She'd be in her 90s today. Her and my dad are both passed away. But they talk all the time about like leaving a place maybe better than when you got there to begin with. And I think we've done that. And it's not finished. We've got all these coaches that are sitting here with contracts, and Mickey and the leadership in place to continue that. But yeah, we're not writing an obituary today. It's a step. It's just another direction. I think in fairness to Dennis, who's a great candidate in the building, or any other coach that possibly would be hired, I think that there's no half in this game. You're jumping in the deep end and you're swimming. And if you elect to stay out, then that's fine. But I think that, I think that that's the approach that I think has to be taken. When does it end? Does it end when you get fired? I said at the beginning, I think it's easier to be fired. As difficult as that is, you thank everybody and they say, well, we wish him well. He made it. But when you choose to leave, I referenced, whether it's been Tony Dungy or whether it's been Bill Cowher or whether it's been, who are the more recent examples just in how to approach this. But yeah, it was a decision ultimately that sat with me, and I'm comfortable with it. All right, my biggest regret first, besides the Ninkovich debacle, would be the double reverse against Tampa Bay. We ran a double reverse against Tampa Bay in the 4-minute and lost the game. Then Mickey brought me a study on Ambien and its erratic behavior and mood swings with people. I've got a lot of regrets. I mentioned one of them. I wish I would have done a better job early on in my career with the media, and hopefully I corrected that. But yeah, there are always going to be personnel regrets, decisions, but yeah, the double reverse, the Ninkovich decision. There's a lot. There are. It's easy to say you're most proud of a Super Bowl team, but I'm most proud of the culture and the winning seasons. Our first year here was 06. 07, we played in the Hall of Fame game in Canton. We played the Steelers. I believe it was their 50th. There was an anniversary for Pittsburgh. And so every once in a while as a coach, you get into one of these games you're not really sure about. And we had a player that we had just signed. I can't tell you his name, but he was on Pittsburgh's roster. And it was during training camp. So we're talking about a 90-man roster. It was a wide receiver. We go to Canton. We're playing the Steelers. And come to find out, he was cut because the Steelers had found out he had stolen some stuff from the locker room and from some good players there. And so during pregame warm-up for a preseason game, I noticed the level of intensity is a little bit unusual for a pregame. And anyway, we played that game and got waxed. And we did a tour of the museum, the Hall of Fame. And aside from the Katrina exhibit, there wasn't a Hall of Fame player. Ricky was going to go in, I think, a year or two later. And so I talked to the players a little bit about culture. And now many of them weren't aware of the Steelers story, with Chuck Noll and the years there that they were close. And then finally, they get over the hump. And man, that time frame is shorter now for young coaches, for new coaches. But if you can, that you can build something that that will stay for a while. And so I would say, Larry, it would be the how we're viewed today by anyone who's 21, 22, or younger is pretty cool, pretty good. What will I miss most? I'll miss the people. There's a feeling when something happens in a game and you watch one of your players do something and grow that any teacher, I think, would tell you is awfully rewarding. Regardless of whether he's a starter, a backup, or a practice squad player, but to see them improve or get better and do something extraordinary, man, like that can fill you. So the relationships and then, the teaching part of it. You don't even think about the ending. Like you don't have time to think about, what if you don't have time to think about. So for the last, call it maybe week, I've thought about not the ending, but the presentation of the ending, like this. But I don't think when you're young and going fast and trying to build something, you're ever considering what it's going to be like. There's a motivation, a strong motivation when you discuss like fear of failure. That's I think a very real driving force. I honestly had no idea about 15 years. You're just focused on just going and winning and getting more players and people that can help you win. And it doesn't seem like 15 seasons, honestly. It seems probably more like 11. And it's never, I always say this when I see the children of our coaches, when I see Dennis Allen's children or Pete Carmichael's children or CJ's children or Dan Dalrymple, that's what ages you. Because you remember, their ages when you first started. But you see those other people like the same way. You don't see the age, really, because you're around them so much.
Coach, talk about how tough the season was. How excruciating was it for the Bucs game? To be sitting on that sofa watching the game at home.
Listen, honestly, it wasn't excruciating because we were winning. It was exciting. I was just like you. Now, not you covering the game, but I was just like you, the fan. And you don't know how that game, you're playing a team that just won the Super Bowl. And you don't move your cup because it's in the right spot. You don't, all those things took place. And so that was a really good moment. It was a moment that I was so proud for our players and our coaches and everyone that was a part of that win. That was unique, obviously, but it was more just like a fan. There's not like there's communication early in the week relative to some early parts of the game plan, but man, those guys on our staff did a great job. Everyone jumped in and really picked up. The roles maybe were different a little bit, and Ryan Nielsen almost got a bench foul for getting into a shouting match with Brady. But when you watch that game, you saw passion. And so, like I told our team, they won the division. They didn't beat us, so.
Sean, kind of brought up how the way you know how to do it is late in the night, early in the morning, that sort of thing. Did that become harder as your career progressed? And if you like,
The season didn't weigh on me. Mickey knows this. I'll be honest with you, and I want this to sound the right way. So we've evacuated a couple times, right? We went to Indianapolis. And then I'd say we've had 3 warnings. And in all 3 events, I want to go. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, this is the perfect chance. You know, not talking about a crisis. But, you know, you take a team and their family members and an organization to another city, there's a lot of work and money involved in that. This gets back to Mrs. B and Dennis. Will it help us? Yes. Here's why. And then someday a story on why we chose Jacksonville. And I think Jeff got a lot of it right. Those challenges are exciting. Because I've heard, look, and I'm not offended, but I've heard a lot of people say, man, he looked exhausted. And that was probably more he looked out of shape than exhausted. I'm not offended. I'm all right with that. I'm okay. But that gets back to Doug Miller's Zoom camera angle, honestly. And we miss Greg Benzel being here today. He's getting his gallbladder done. So I told Doug, I want a little elevation. I don't want any cameras that are just like staring at my neck from 2 feet away. The season wasn't exhausting. It was exciting. And us moving for 4 weeks was perfect. Obviously not for our city, but I'm just saying relative to building a team where training camps in the last couple of years are just different for obviously good reasons. And so here came this opportunity to develop a team culture and prepare for another season. And so, but this question you're asking, this topic, there's been so many more times where Mickey's like, and I'm like, no, let's do it. Let's definitely do this. And Mickey's like, it's a thunderstorm. I'm like, that's all right. We can go somewhere. Or we can do something that heightens the level of awareness. Think about it, Mike. When does the question get asked? No one asked the fired coach if he was burnt out. Right? You ask him, hey, how was your time here? What are you going to do next? What have you? And so we'll figure it out. Yeah, there's an element of, I don't know, burnout seems kind of, it's like the next challenge too sometimes. Like, what's next? Yeah, I don't think there was one moment. No, there wasn't a moment where it's like, holy cow. I mean, look, no one had fun the week we played Miami. No, that was what it was. And I understand it. But no, there wasn't that moment where you came back in and said, all right. There were moments that you felt like, man, I don't want to be grumpy about something, soured on something, but I'm pretty upbeat, and I would say raised by my mom in a way, and I say this, both my parents, but my mom was very optimistic, and I think those traits, I feel like I'm that way. And so there's times where, you get heated in the game, and, whether it's a player, coach, or anyone, you might have just, but I don't really think about it the next day. So there was not that, this is it. I can't point to one. Listen, I will always have a place and a part of me here, and I'm waiting to move into another residence, and But those decisions will come with, hopefully, I just had a meeting with the staff and reflected on a number of things, and hopefully you make an impression like others before me made an impression with me that I don't even know it, but maybe that I'm passing on to future head coaches, future coordinators, future GMs, because I want every one of them to realize those dreams. Like I root for, Doug Marrone when he's being a head coach, and now at Alabama, and Curtis at Tulane, and Dennis at Oakland, and any of these people that were part of this process here, regardless of where they're at, you root for them. I do, and because you want to see them have success, and it's important to our program. And no different than our players. I think it's the hardest thing for a player sometimes when they end up on a different roster. Man, we're pulling for you. Like I'm pulling for Von Bell and Trey. Eli a little bit. It's the unknown. I mean, all of us, we all get comfortable with certain things, right? We get comfortable in certain shoes. You don't know it until your better half tells you you're going to wear that again, and you realize that it's on like a 4-day rotation instead of, a 12-day rotation. We get comfortable in our jobs. We get comfortable in our relationships. We get comfortable, and every once in a while, and I think this probably plays a big part of it. It's you don't want to have a regret relative to another challenge or another, and so retirement I don't think is the right word today. I think the hardest thing about the 18 season is you're a game away. You get more excited for the players and the coaches on your team that have never been, they don't understand, and I recall saying this a number of times. I don't know what you think it's like to be in a Super Bowl and win it. So picture that question posed to a player, or for that matter, anyone in here as part of the organization. And then I want you to times it by 100,000. That's how good it is. And it's like, really? 200,000. And even when you look back on those moments where in 2009 when the season ended, you're not ready to stop playing. Like you're like, I don't want this to stop. And so the frustration later in your career is, you've watched something or done something and you can't wait to show your friend, like, where do you see this movie? And you really want to watch it again, almost more than they want to watch it for the first time. Or experience, like, where do you try this dish? And you're like, I don't want to try that. You're like, no, I'll eat it with you. That is the Super Bowl. And so that's one of the things that you look forward to doing is watching others' reactions. Like, where do you see pregame warm-up? You're not going to feel your feet. And you're like, what? Those are the things Mike Westhoff, who's been in the league for however many years, this is going to be his first chance. That's what you want for the players, the coaches, and everyone new in the building that wasn't around for that. It's the journey part of it is the most amazing part.